Hi, welcome to the channel. Let's go back in time to 1991 to my first job in the music industry, working at Chesky Records and more specifically, working on this album, McCoy Tyner's New York Reunion, with Joe Henderson, Al Foster, and Ron Carter. I've got some interesting stories to tell you, and I hope you enjoy them. In 1991, McCoy Tyner was not at the peak of his career. He was still playing, he was active musician. Musically, he was at the top of his game. Always at the top of his game, but he was not in vogue or as popular as he was in the '60s and the '70s, coming off the career playing with John Coltrane. He was mostly playing gigs with his trio, sometimes with Bobby Hutcherson, but mostly he was recording with the trio or with other names that he was associated with, but he just didn't have the momentum in his career that he was having earlier in the '70s and '80s. So for me, as a kid fresh out of college, working my first job, when I had the opportunity at this label where I was interning to work with McCoy Tyner, being into jazz, man, this was a huge deal for me. Huge. I mean, McCoy Tyner, the 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 oomph behind John Coltrane. It, it doesn't get more. It doesn't get better than that. And I thought, man, starting my career with this as an intern, I'm going straight to the top with the music industry. It was not that way, but man, it was sure optimistic at that time. I'll tell you a little bit about the company. The Chesky Records was run by two brothers, Norman and David. David was the musician, and Norman was the brains behind the business. Norman liked me a lot. I made him laugh, but he just saw me as like some crazy punk kid who was into jazz he just liked having me around. David, he was so quiet you could never figure him out. He was always nice to me. You know, I have no problem with David. He was nice to me. There was a guy named Roy. He was the office manager. Roy hated me. He didn't like me at all. He wanted to fire me, but he couldn't fire me because Norman loved me. Norman told me I would make him laugh when I took out the garbage from his office every day. Then there was a guy named Steve. He was the A&R guy. He was responsible for setting up the session, taking care of everything, and most importantly, chaperoning Joe Henderson while he was in New York. He was a bass player, and I know he was a little bit jealous because he would have loved to have played on that record, but they wanted Ron Carter. Because, I mean, hey, it's Ron Carter. But I remember very clearly when this session was booked and the excitement in the office was hitting a swell, and Norman came in and he's yelling at Steve, "Man, I'm nervous. This Joe Henderson guy, I mean, Joe was notorious for for as a drug user. Norman was very concerned about his punctuality, his ability to play. He was It was his financial investment and he didn't want it to be ruined. He was yelling at Steve. Steve told me that Joe Henderson had a nickname, the Phantom, which comes from this album from Duke Pearson. The reason why he was called the Phantom is because at his apartment, or his house where he lived, I believe it was in the Bay Area at the time in San Francisco, you never knew if Joe was home. The lights were always off. Maybe he was there, maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was dead, maybe he was alive, no one knew, but they called him the Phantom because it looked like a ghost house. So Norman, going crazy, screaming, "I don't want you to let this guy out of his sight. I want you to pick him up at the airport. You drive him around. If he goes to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom. I don't want him in there. If he's in there for more than 5 minutes, you go in there after him. I don't care. You pull him out. I don't want pick him up at the hotel and you stay with him by his side all day and you drop him off at the hotel. Do not let this guy out of your sight." Well, when the day of the session came, I remember Joe walking in The nicest guy, little old guy, just kind of shuffling when he walks. Very friendly, very polite. But man, I had this image in my head of this drug using monster, just a fiend, like the Iggy Pop of jazz, which surely he was not. Another person involved with the recording, one of the producers, Steve Guttenberg. You may know him as the audiophiliac. Back then, he was not the audiophiliac. He was a music writer and working at sound by singer. He was just a guy, but we go way back. I knew him then, and I think back. This is probably when I first met him. Was the recording of this album? But he was friends with Jeremy Kipnis. Jeremy was the house engineer for Chesky. Jeremy was a genius, mad genius. He was the son of Igor Kipnis, famous harpsichord player, who in turn was the son of Alexander Kipnis, who sang with the Metropolitan Opera. Just came from a musical family. He had the ear for sound. After Chesky, he would go on to have a career where he would put together sound systems for people for their custom spaces, and he's most known for putting together this $3 million stereo system that he had in his garage. That is unreal. You can Google it. It's crazy. Jeremy Kipnis stereo. It it's unreal. The amps and the speakers and the it was an all immersive sound system before all immersive sound systems. He was doing stuff for people like George Lucas. Jeremy sold me his old gear, two Proton amps, and speakers by Cambridge Soundworks. The original ensembles when it came with two subwoofers and two satellite speakers. Man, those things sounded great. They were the house speakers we used at Chesky. We used those to listen to everything. Let's cut to the album. About early April 1991, the time came. Man, I was excited. The day before the session, I guess everyone was in town rehearsing. They would usually rehearse the day before at a rehearsal space. And I remember Jeremy and I pushing our racks of gear from the Chesky office, which was on 43rd between 8th and Ninth, over to RCA Studio A, which was on 6th Avenue between 6th and 7th. So it was basically 2 blocks away and 1 block up. But man, it was so exciting pushing these racks of gear, carrying the cables when we had custom everything, custom microphones, custom amplifiers, custom D to A converters, custom A to D converters, custom cables, you name it. Chesky had it custom made. Chesky is one of the few audiophile labels at the time, so people really wanted Chesky to endorse their gear. So all these people were making custom gear for us, and luckily for a guy like me who was just a kid, I got the scraps. So who was I? I mean, I was 22 with Cardis cables. I was the happiest guy in the world. So I remember we got in there, we set up the gear, laid the cables. I just remember being in RCA Studio A, and I'm just take it all in, and I think to myself, wow, this is it. Everyone recorded here. All the big names. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I didn't know at the time that that studio was built in about 67 or 68, and that the real RCA studio was lower downtown. But still, for me, it was RCA Studio A. And man, this place was huge, and the sound was great in there. It was absolutely great. And then yeah, McCoy. Well, what can you say? The best. Really, one of the best. One of my all-time favorites. An honor to work with him. As I said before, Joe Henderson, as nice as can be. Ron Carter, I remember he just showed up right before the session. He was set up, ready to play on time. They recorded their bit over 2 days. Al Foster was on drums. And man, what can I say? It was so overwhelming and so amazing to be there in the studio and to watch everything come together. Chesky was famous for recording with one primary stereo microphone. They did use some supplemental microphones, and everything was recorded digital, but it didn't matter. They really they zeroed in on the sound, and they got it. I believe the sessions I'm not going to say I'm 100% correct, but I believe the sessions were backed to analog tape, but I'm not going to swear to it. I believe that all the sessions were multi-track to analog, but digital was the primary source. It was 1991. It was the time of CDs. I mean, that's what was going on. And to put it in perspective of what was, this session was around April 1991, and stuff like Pearl Jam's 10 and Hole Pretty on the Inside didn't come out till August of 1991, and Nevermind didn't come out till September 1991. I remember the next day after the session we had to go back and get something. I don't remember what was there, but I went back with the A&R guy, and Wynton Marsalis had booked the studio, and I remember meeting Wynton. The only time I ever met him. I know, not a fan, but I will say this: he was very nice. But then again, it was 1991. He wasn't the arrogant asshole that he would become later on in his career. I learned a lot about the music industry working at Chesky Records. I was there for a good year and a half, and I remember thinking to myself, one day I'm going to have my own label. I sat there and I listened to every phone call that the A&R guy made, and when he would talk to the artists, I would listen to what he would say, how he would say it, how he would get what he wanted, and I'd suck it all in. And I listened to the sales guy, to Lee, and I would listen to him sell stuff, and I'd listen to him sell stuff he believed in, stuff he didn't believe in, but I listened. And then I listened to the accountant, I listened to Roy, the office manager, I listened to all of them. I just sat there every day. I'd do my work, I answer the 800 number, take orders, I'd pack orders, I'd do whatever they needed me to do. But I would just listen. And I thought, this is how they do it. This works. But if I were to do it, how would I do it my way? And I took that information. I learned. It was the best experience for me. A couple years later, when I was working at the knitting factory, there was a conference of jazz record labels, and Norman was there. And he saw me in the hallway, and he screams, "Oh my God, I gave this guy his first job in the record industry. He's a big hotshot record producer now. I gave him his start. Everything he learned from me," which was not 100% true. He gave me the opportunity to learn everything. I taught myself. They didn't teach me anything. I taught myself. The lesson here, pay attention. That's it. If you want to learn, pay attention. After the session, I remember in the office they were coming in, there was a brainstorming meeting, and they called me in, and they're sitting around there trying to think, what's a good name for the record? What's a good name? They're kicking ideas around. And I said, New York Reunion. And they all looked at me and they're like, that's really good. I titled the record. I couldn't believe it, man. I thought this is going to be the best career music ever. I also remember in that same meeting, they laid out 3 different covers for the record, 3 possible covers. And they asked me which one I thought was the best one. And I looked at the cover that became the cover, and it, as you saw, it was all pink. And here I am, this kind of punk industrial new wave guy, wears all black. I said, not that one. They looked at me and they said, that's the one we're going with. Whatever he says he doesn't like, that's the one we're going with. And man, I'll tell you that still to this day, I would never pick that cover. But you got to remember, it was 1991. Miami Vice was popular. All the record covers at the label had pink and baby blue in the art. That's just what it was. The Chesky brothers were from Miami, and they loved this flamingo look that was very popular in the late 80s and 90s. The record really caught fire, and it ran up the charts. I'm pretty sure it was a Billboard Top 10 record at the time. And then McCoy followed it with a record called Remembering John on Enja, which came out a few months later, which really shot to the top and put McCoy Tyner back in the forefront, where he should have been all along. But let's talk about the pressing. It's a long time ago, so I can't remember exactly what it sounds like in the studio. But for me, the CD, it's what I remember. At the time, I didn't have top tier audiophile gear, so I couldn't tell you. I was just so excited. It sounded great to me. I had no issues. The album didn't come out on vinyl until 1992, 1 year later. I don't have an original pressing to compare, but I do have the 2016 pressing by Ryan K. Smith and the 2025 pressing, it's a one step, cut by Andreas Kauflet, who is the main engineer at Schnitt Stella Mastering and Vinyl Schnitt and Sonenale in Berlin. Well, I can say, I've compared the two back to back. They both sound great. The Ryan K. Smith, it doesn't have a, the full bass that the new current one step has. The 2016 is cut at a normal level, but because there's less bass, it emphasizes the high end. So it sounds great. It sounds natural. It sounds kind of more like the CD. But the 2025, man, wow. It is a full sound across the spectrum. The bass is really deep and clear. I don't know if it's exaggerated because it's hard to recall back to a recording session that was 35 years ago. But man, this thing just sounds amazing. It hits with a bottom end and it's clear to the top end. Now, I will say that it may not have as much top end on the 2025, but because of it has so much in the low end, it sounds more balanced, and the Ryan K. Smith feels more top heavy, like you're getting more treble because of the lack of bass to balance it out. If it's a record you are interested in, I do recommend the new 2025 One Step. I can tell you, man, for me personally, it brings back a flood of memories. It's a very important record for me. Something that really was there when I kickstarted my career in the music industry. The peak of the CD season, learning about the music business, it was unbelievable. I was living in New York City, working at Chesky during the day, working at Tower Records down at 4th and Broadway at night. It was a great time for me. CBGBs. So, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm, so like it, don't like it, but we'll see you back here.